The Bristol Blenheim is a British light bomber aircraft designed and built by the Bristol Aeroplane Company that was used extensively in the first 2 years of the Second World War. It was adapted as an interim long-range and night fighter, pending the availability of the Beaufighter. It was one of the first British aircraft to have all-metal stressed skin construction, retractable landing gear, flaps, a powered gun turret and variable pitch propellers. A Canadian-built variant named the Bolingbroke was used as an anti-submarine and trainer. The Blenheim Mk I outran most biplane fighters in the late 1930s but stood little chance against the German Messerschmitt Bf 109 during daylight operations, though it proved successful as a night fighter. The Mark IV variant was equally unsuccessful in its daylight bombing role, suffering many losses in the early stages of the war. Design and development. In 1934, Lord Rothermere, owner of the Daily Mail newspaper, challenged the British aviation industry to build a high-speed aircraft capable of carrying 6 passengers and 2 crew members. At the time, German firms were producing a variety of record-breaking high-speed designs, such as the single-engined Heinkel He-70, and Rothermere wanted to recapture the title of fastest civilian aircraft in Europe. Bristol had been working on a suitable design as the Type 135 feet since July 1933, and further adapted it to produce the Type 142 to meet Rothermere's requirements. Named Britain First, this first flew at Filton on April 12, 1935, and proved to be faster than any fighter in service with the Royal Air Force at the time. The Air Ministry was obviously interested in such an aircraft and quickly sent out specification B-28/35 for prototypes of a bomber version. The Type 142M. The main change was to move the wing from a low wing to a mid-wing position, allowing room under the main spar for a bomb bay. The aircraft was all metal with 2 Bristol Mercury 8 air-cooled radial engines, each of 860 horsepower. It carried a crew of 3: a Euro pilot, navigator, bombardier and telegraphist air gunner. Armament comprised a single forward-firing .303 in Browning machine gun outboard of the port engine and a .303 in Lewis gun in a semi-retracting Bristol Type B Mk I dorsal turret firing to the rear. From 1939 onwards, the Lewis gun was replaced by the more modern .303 in Vickers VGO machine gun of the same caliber. A 1,000 pounds bomb load could be carried in the internal bay. To achieve its relatively high speed, the Blenheim had a very small fuselage cross-section, with its upper front glazing all at one angle in the form of a stepless cockpit, but used no separate windscreen panels for the pilot, a notable feature of a substantial majority of German bomber designs, first conceived during the war years. The pilot's quarters on the left side of the nose were so cramped that the control yoke obscured all flight instruments while engine instruments eliminated the forward view on landings. Most secondary instruments were arranged along the left side of the cockpit, with essential items like propeller pitch control actually placed behind the pilot where they had to be operated by feel alone. Like most contemporary British aircraft, the bomb bay doors were kept closed with bungee cords and opened under the weight of the released bombs. Because there was no way to predict how long it would take for the bombs to force the doors open, bombing accuracy was consequently poor. The aircraft was ordered directly from the drawing board with the first production model serving as the only prototype. The service name then became Blenheim Mk I after the famous battle during the War of the Spanish Succession. Subsequent deliveries started on March 10, 1937, with 114 Squadron being the first squadron to receive the Blenheim. The aircraft was built under license by countries including Finland and Yugoslavia, which built 60 aircraft. Other countries bought it, including Romania, Greece and Turkey. Total production of the Blenheim Mk I in England was 1,351 aircraft. Work on an extended-range reconnaissance version started as the Blenheim Mk II, which increased tankage from 278 gallons to 468 gallons. But only one was completed. Another modification resulted in the Blenheim Mk III, which lengthened the nose, and thereby dispensed with the stepless cockpit format of the Mk I and introducing a true windscreen in front of the pilot, to provide more room for the bombardier. This required the nose to be scooped out in front of the pilot to maintain visibility during takeoff and landing. However, both of these modifications were instead combined, along with a newer version of the Mercury engine with 905 horsepower, and the turret acquired a pair of Brownings instead of the Vickers K, creating the Blenheim Mk4. A total of 3,307 were produced. Another modification led to a long-range fighter version, the Blenheim Mk If. For this role, about 200 Blenheims were fitted with a gun pack under the fuselage for 4.303 in Brownings. Later, the airborne intercept Mk3 or 4 radar was fitted to some aircraft in use as night fighters. These were the first British fighters to be equipped with radar. Their performance was marginal as a fighter, but they served as an interim type, pending availability of the Beaufighter. About 60 MKIVs were also equipped with a gun pack as the MKIVF and were used by Coastal Command to protect convoys from German long-range bombers. The last bomber variant was conceived as an armored ground attack aircraft, with a solid nose containing 4 more Browning machine guns. Originally known as the BSLI, the production aircraft were renamed Blenheim Mk5 and featured a strengthened structure, pilot armor, interchangeable nose gun pack or bombardier position, and yet another Mercury variant, this time with 950 horsepower. The MKV was ordered for conventional bombing operations, with the removal of armor and most of the glazed nose section. The MKV, or Type 160, was used primarily in the Middle East and Far East. The Blenheim served as the basis for the Beaufort torpedo bomber, which itself led to the Beaufighter, with the lineage performing 2 complete circles of bomber to fighter. Operational history. On the day that war was declared on Germany, a Blenheim piloted by Flying Officer Andrew Macpherson was the first British aircraft to cross the German coast, and the following morning 15 Blenheims from 3 squadrons set off on one of the first bombing missions. With the rapid advances in technology which had taken place in the late 1930s, by then the aircraft was already obsolescent. The Blenheim was regarded as a pleasant aircraft to fly, although it did have some characteristics which could catch even experienced pilots by surprise. It had become heavier as extra service equipment was installed. Much of this was found to be needed through operational experience. This, coupled with the rapid performance increases of fighters, had eclipsed the Blenheim's speed advantage. The light armament of 1.303 in Vickers VGO in the turret and 1.303 in Browning machine gun in the port wing was seldom able to deter fighter opposition. Squadrons were forced to use several different improvisations in an attempt to provide better defensive armament, until officially sanctioned modifications were able to be introduced in early 1940. The Blenheim also proved to be vulnerable to flak, especially around the rear fuselage. Flexible, self-sealing liners had been fitted to the fuel tanks, but they were still not fully protected against the 20 mm MGFF cannon carried by the Luftwaffe Eurosas Bf-109s and Bf-110s. After France fell to Germany in June 1940, the Free French Air Force was formed at RAF-ODIM in the form of Group Mixte de Combat 1, consisting of a mixed bag of Blenheims and Westland Lysander liaison observation aircraft, which eventually went to North Africa and saw action against the Italians and Germans. The Battle of Britain. The Blenheim units operated throughout the battle, often taking heavy casualties, although they were never accorded the publicity of the fighter squadrons. The Blenheim units raided German-occupied airfields throughout July to December 1940, both during daylight hours and at night. Although most of these raids were unproductive, there were some successes. On August 1, 5 out of 12 Blenheims sent to attack Harmstead and Evian were able to bomb, destroying or heavily damaging 3 Bf-109s of 2/JG-27 and apparently killing a Starfolk Peter Currency N identified as Hauptmann Albrecht von Ankenfrank. 2 other 109s were claimed by Blenheim gunners. Another successful raid on Harmstead was made by a single Blenheim on August 7, which destroyed one 109 of 4/JG-54, heavily damaged another and caused lighter damage to 4 more. There were also some missions which produced an almost 100% casualty rate amongst the Blenheims. One such operation was mounted on August 13, 1940 against a Luftwaffe airfield near Aalborg in northwestern Denmark by 12 aircraft of 82 Squadron. 1 Blenheim returned early. The other 11, which reached Denmark, were shot down, 5 by flak and 6 by Bf 109s. Blenheim-equipped units had been formed to carry out long-range strategic reconnaissance missions over Germany and German-occupied territories, as well as bombing operations. In this role, the Blenheims once again proved to be too slow and vulnerable against Luftwaffe fighters, and they took constant casualties. Cologne Power Stations raid. The action on August 12, 1941 was described by the Daily Telegraph in 2006 as the RAF's most audacious and dangerous low-level bombing raid, a large-scale attack against power stations near Cologne. The raid was a low-level daylight raid by 54 Blenheims under the command of Wing Commander Nickel of No. 114 Squadron RAF. The Blenheims hit their targets, but 12 of the Blenheims were lost during the raid, 22% of those that took part, which was far above the sustainable loss rate of less than 5%. The England cricketer Sqnld Abul Edridge was awarded the DFC for his part in the raid. Long-range fighter. The Bristol Blenheim was used by both bomber and fighter commands. Some 200 Mk I bombers were modified into MKIF long-range fighters, with 600 Squadron based at Hendon, the first squadron to take delivery of these variants in September 1938. By 1939, at least 7 squadrons were operating these twin-engine fighters, and within a few months, some 60 squadrons had experience of the type. The MKIF proved to be slower and less nimble than expected, and by June 1940, daylight Blenheim losses were to cause concern for fighter command. It was then decided that the MKIF would be relegated mainly to night fighter duties, where No. 23 Squadron RAF, which had already operated the type under nighttime conditions, had better success. Night fighter. In the German night bombing raid on London on June 18, 1940, Blenheims accounted for 5 German bombers, thus proving that they were better suited for night fighting. In July, No. 600 Squadron, by then based at RAF Manston, had some of its MKIFs equipped with AIMK-3 radar. With this radar equipment, a Blenheim from the Fighter Interception Unit at RAF Ford achieved the first success on the night of July 3, 1940, accounting for a Dornier Do-17 bomber. More successes came, and before long the Blenheim proved itself invaluable as a night fighter. Gradually, with the introduction of the Bristol Beaufighter in 1940–1941, the Blenheim was supplanted by its faster, better armed descendant. Eastern Service. Blenheims continued to operate widely in many combat roles until about 1943, equipping RAF squadrons in the UK and on British bases in Egypt, Iraq, Aden, India, British Malaya, Singapore, and the Dutch East Indies. Many Blenheims were lost to Japanese fighters during the Malayan Campaign, battles for Singapore, and Sumatra. By that point, the traditional daylight light bomber role was more effectively carried out by suitable fighter bombers, and the surviving examples were relegated to training duties. Nonetheless, the Blenheim played a role in preventing India from falling and recapturing Burma, destroying over 60 aircraft on the ground in raids on Bangkok early in the campaign. One Blenheim pilot, squadron leader Arthur Scarfe, was posthumously awarded the Victoria Cross for an attack on Singapore, Thailand, on December 9, 1941. Another bomber of No. 60 Squadron RAF was credited with shooting down Lieutenant Colonel Tatio Kaita-S Nakajima Ki-43 fighter and badly damaging 2 others in a single engagement on May 22, 1942, over the Bay of Bengal. Kaita-S death was a severe blow to the Imperial Japanese Army Air Force. The Air Ministry's replacement for the Blenheim as a daylight bomber, another Bristol design, the Buckingham, was overtaken by events and changes in requirements and considered inferior to the de Havilland Mosquito, and as such did not see combat. The final ground attack version the Blenheim Mk I first equipped 139 Squadron in June 1942. Eventually 13 squadrons mainly in the Middle East and Far East received this variant but operated them generally only for a few months. Finland. In 1936, the Finnish Air Force ordered 18 Blenheim Mk Is from Britain, and 2 years later, they obtained a manufacturing license for the aircraft. Before any aircraft could be manufactured at the Valtion lentokontors in Finland, the Winter War broke out, forcing the Finns to order more aircraft from the UK. A further 24 British-manufactured Blenheims were ordered during the Winter War. After the Winter War, 55 Blenheims were constructed in Finland, bringing the total number to 97 aircraft. The Finns also received 20 half-completed ex-Yugoslavian Mk4 Blenheims captured by Germany, together with manufacturing tools and production equipment, as well as a huge variety of spare parts. Yugoslavia had ceased production of the Mk I and commenced a production run of Mk IVs just prior to the April 1941 invasion. The Finnish Blenheims flew 423 missions during the Winter War, and close to 3,000 missions during the Continuation War and Lapland War. Blenheim machine gunners also shot down 8 Soviet aircraft. 37 Blenheims were lost in combat during the wars. After the war, Finland was prohibited from flying bomber aircraft by the Paris Peace Treaty, with Finland's Blenheims being placed into storage in 1948. However, in 1951, 5 Blenheims were reactivated for use as target tugs, with the last flight of a Finnish Blenheim taking place on May 20, 1958. Variants: Blenheim Mk I, 3-seat twin-engined light bomber, powered by two 840 horsepower Bristol Mercury 8 radial piston engines, armed with a 0.303-in machine gun in the port wing, plus a 0.303-in Vickers K gun in the dorsal turret, maximum bomb load 1,000 pounds 1,552 built. Company designation Type 142M, Blenheim Mk IF, night fighter version, equipped with an AIMK-3 or Mk4 airborne interceptor radar, armed with 4 0.303-in machine guns in a special gun pack under the fuselage. About 200 Blenheim Mk Is were converted into Mk IF night fighters. Blenheim Mk2, long-range reconnaissance version with extra fuel tankage. Only one Blenheim Mk2 was built. Blenheim Mk3, Blenheim Mk4, improved version, fitted with protective armor, powered by two 905 horsepower Bristol Mercury 15 radial piston engines, armed with a 0.303-in machine gun in the port wing, plus two 0.303-in machine guns in a powered-operated dorsal turret, and two remotely controlled rearward-firing 0.303-in machine gun mounted beneath the nose, maximum bomb load 1,000 pounds internally and 320 pounds externally. 3,307 built. Blenheim Mk IVF, long-range fighter version, armed with four 0.303-in machine guns in special gun pack under the fuselage. About 60 Blenheim Mk IVs were converted into Mk IVF fighters. Blenheim Mk5, high-altitude bomber version, powered by two Bristol Mercury 15 or XXV radial piston engines. Operators. Survivors. An airworthy Blenheim had been rebuilt from a scrapped Bolingbroke over a 12-year period, only to crash at an air show at Denham within a month of completion in 1987. A replacement Bolingbroke Mk-IVT was rebuilt to flying status in just 5 years and painted to represent a Blenheim Mk4 in RAF wartime service. It began appearing at air shows and exhibitions in the UK, flying since May 1993 and was used in the 1995 film version of Shakespeare's Richard III. This aircraft crashed on landing at Beaufort on August 19, 2003. The crash was feared to have made it a write-off, but after extensive repair and conversion to the Mk I short-nose version by the Aircraft Restoration Company at Beaufort, was displayed to the public on May 30, 2014, and first flew for 29 minutes on November 20, 2014, following restoration at the Imperial War Museum Beaufort, Cambridgeshire, England. In Canada, a number of other Bolingbroke survived the war but were summarily consigned to the scrap heap. Post-war, enterprising farmers often bought surplus aircraft such as these for the scrap metal content, tires for farm implements, and even for the fuel remaining in the tanks. Some surviving examples in Canada of the Bolingbroke can be traced back to this period. The Canadian Warplane Heritage Museum in Hamilton, Ontario is rebuilding a Bolingbroke to airworthy status. The Commonwealth Air Training Plan Museum in Brandon, Manitoba has restored the exterior of one Bolingbroke, painting it in the Air Training Plan yellow color. This particular aircraft is on display at a location on the Trans-Canada Highway in Brandon. A restored Bolingbroke is on static display at the British Columbia Aviation Museum in Victoria, British Columbia. The Canadian Museum of Flight at Langley Airport, Langley, British Columbia has on display the restored nose and cockpit section of a Bolingbroke, and holds the rest of an entire airframe in storage pending future restoration and display. In Finland, the sole surviving original Blenheim in the world, a Mk4 registered as BL-200 of the Finnish Air Force, has been completely restored and is now on display at the Aviation Museum of Central Finland at Tikkakoski. In the summer of 1996, a Bristol Blenheim Mk I Bf was recovered from the sea, a few kilometers off Rhethymnon, Crete. The aircraft belonged to No. 203 Squadron RAF and was downed by friendly fire on April 28, 1941. The Blenheim was moved to the Hellenic Air Force Museum for restoration. In Arizona, the Pima Air Museum has a Bristol Bolingbroke IVT on static display. In Belgium, the Royal Museum of the Armed Forces and Military History has Bristol Fairchild Bolingbroke 40 on static display. Specifications. Data from British warplanes of World War II, general characteristics, crew, 3, length, 42 feet 7 inches, wingspan, 56 feet 4 in, height, 9 feet 10 in, wing area, 469 feet 2, empty weight, 9,790 pounds, loaded weight, 14,400 pounds, power plant, 2 Bristol Mercury 15 radial engine, 920 horsepower each, propellers, 3-bladed Hamilton standard propeller, performance, maximum speed, 266 miles per hour, cruise speed, 198 miles per hour, range, 1,460 miles, service ceiling, 27,260 feet, wing loading, 30.7 pounds FTA squared, power mass, 0.13 horsepower per pound, climb to 6,500 feet, 4 minutes 10 seconds, armament, guns, 1 A, .303 in Browning machine gun in port wing, 1 or 2 A, .303 in Browning guns in rear firing under nose blister or Nash & Thompson FN-54 turret, 2 A, .303 in Browning guns in dorsal turret. Bombs, 1,200 pounds, 4 A, 250 pounds bombs or, 2 A, 500 pounds bombs internally and 8 A, 40 pounds bombs externally. See also, related development, Bristol Beaufort, Bristol Beaufighter, Bristol Fairchild Bolingbroke, aircraft of comparable role, configuration and era, Block MB 170, Dornier Do 17, Douglas B-18 Bolo, Tupolev SB, related lists, list of bomber aircraft, list of aircraft of the United Kingdom in World War II, list of aircraft of World War II. References. Notes Bibliography External links, RAF Bristol Blenheim History, No. 211 Squadron RAF, Blenheim Society, Aircraft Restoration Company, Finnish Mk4 Blenheim Restoration, Up in the Blenheim, a Civilian Pilot's Impressions. Flight, June 24, 1937, How the Bristol Blenheims Are Erected. Aircraft Engineer, May 19, 1938, in the air for a Euro flying the Blenheim. Flight, November 15, 1945.